So I'm going to talk about JavaScript Deno on the edge tonight. At Kitson Kelly is my Twitter handle. And first, a little bit about me. I've been in the JavaScript space since about 2008. I used to be the former project lead for a sort of loved but not loved enough front-end framework called Dojo. Had a lot of influence in the industry. And my first contribution to Deno was in May of 2018, which was about 14 days after the initial commit. So I've been dealing with Deno for as long as it's been around. I created Oak, which is the most popular Deno-specific project. It's a middleware framework like Koa or Express for Deno. And in September 2020, I joined DenoLand full-time. Since I joined Deno, I've worked on the TypeScript integration initially. That was a lot of my work before I joined as well. And the built-in language server in the command line and the developer experience as a whole have been kind of my areas of focus since I've joined. Talking about the industry as a whole, any of you that are as old as I am, which is getting older and older every year, might remember something in the late 90s, early 2000s called grid compute that was like the next big thing. And then this thing called cloud took over, and then we got into the era of serverless. I think in the last year, 2 years, the term edge compute has started to come in. And edge is, you can think of it as a sort of extension of serverless, but even more serverless. There's still servers involved, there's still other people's servers, but it's that concept that in content delivery in our websites, we learned a long time ago that having a CDN with points of presence that were very near our users was really important to deliver content fast and reliably to the users. And what we've seen in the industry is that we need to push that compute closer to the users. And there's a couple really important things that happen when you push that compute to the user. One, you can start to remove compute from their end user device, but you can also do a lot of really interesting things that were probably not possible that long ago. Even with a serverless thing where you had a centralized server, you might be in 1 or 2 regions in a big cloud provider, and there would still be latency, and you still had to worry about scalability and some performance issues. And so edge compute starts to break that down. But and again, why would you really need edge compute, particularly when we're talking about front-end technologies like JavaScript and TypeScript? So a lot of people immediately talk about, when they talk about edge compute, is server-side rendering is one of the big use cases, and that you can server-side render, so then you don't have to do it on the client side. And that's an important use case, but you also get consistent performance. It doesn't matter as much what the end user's device is capable of. You get a consistency of APIs when you're writing code, because you're only targeting a single runtime environment. You don't have to worry about whether somebody's pulling up IE11 or not necessarily. Especially since we're working in a world where sometimes people have full desktop browsers, and sometimes people have mobile browsers that are very constrained in low bandwidth situations. That not only is it the performance of the endpoint, but it's all the stuff that we have to ship down. But I think one of the things that gets often missed in that conversation is because you can take the compute off of the device, that means you immediately decrease the amount of surface area that you expose to your end users. So from a security perspective, right, you don't have to make API calls to your backend services or even your GraphQL middleware from your browser, right? Because that means that you have to secure all of that communication. You have to be really wise. You leak a whole bunch of information. You send a whole bunch of information to the browser, or even the application in the device that's unsecured, that people can investigate, exploit, and try to reverse engineer your technology, exploit your platforms, and do interesting things. And I think all of us in different cases have situations where we have to sort of defend against that. If you take the compute off the device, well, and all you're sending is HTML and CSS to the device, well, you've eliminated that problem, right? The only thing that gets off your network is the stuff that you actually want to render to the customer, the user. I think, especially in our ecosystem, we say JavaScript these days. You can't really say JavaScript anymore without mentioning TypeScript. It's become such a predominant thing in the industry. There's good reasons for that. There's probably some bad reasons for that as well too. And I think increasingly, every one of us that's doing front-end development, or even in middle tier development, WebAssembly is something that we have to increasingly give consideration for. I know from personal experience that having hybrid situations where you take some high performance or some really complex compute code that in another language like Rust, and you compile it to WebAssembly, really enables some really powerful things, but that you expose an API that's really usable in the JavaScript space. So I think these hybrid situations we're all having to consider these days. And again, if you've got to ship WebAssembly to your browser in the front end, you're tied to the capabilities and the performance characteristics of that browser. And edge compute allows you to move that back one step onto your own environment. Specifically, for those of you not familiar with Deno, the Deno CLI was started in 2018. And it was Ryan Dahl who created Node.js, started Deno initially as an attempt to sort of fix the things that he thought he had gotten wrong with Node.js. Like I said, I've been part of that journey from an early perspective, and have sort of been involved quite heavily since then. And we've been trying to build with Deno something that works really well. Of course, money is money, and you have to make money off of open source software, which is an interesting thing. And the particular path that we chose in Deno is that what we would do is take the foundation of that CLI, the sort of Node.js equivalent, and create something that we call Deno Deploy, which is a commercial service of this sort of edge compute variety. And that's how we intend to make money as a commercial enterprise, is continue to open source and develop completely the CLI. It'll be open source forever. It is an open source project. It has a robust set of contributors that are outside of the core team, and then focus on the commercial viability to pay our bills and to pay people to do that. And I'm thankful for that. I've been in open source for a long time. I've had the luxury when I was being paid to work on open source before, when I was on the Dojo project. We did consulting online. That's a way to make money, but you've really, it takes people dedicated full time to create great open source software. And so, the other option, of course, is to sell our souls to some big corporation, which, who knows, that may happen in the future, and then hope that they continue to want to invest in it. And so we chose our path, and our path was to create a commercial product. We didn't really like the freemium, like Deno CLI premium, that you have to pay every month to use. Didn't seem like the right thing. So we thought a completely separate commercial product. And so we created Deno Deploy. And it's edge compute, developed locally, deployed globally. So when you deploy your code, it's available instantaneously across 33 regions. Zero config, zero maintenance. It runs TypeScript, JavaScript, WebAssembly, provides modern APIs, and quite a bit of the web platform. And one of the things that we've realized too is that that the web platform has done a really good job of sort of getting its act together, right? The big vendors in that space have worked. It's taken a long time, but they kind of work in conjunction. But the TC39. The JavaScript standards body and the web browser consortiums, the WhatWG and that, are really, again, focused on that browser thing. And Cloudflare and Deno, we felt that there really needed to be a group focused on this sort of space of the sort of edge compute, edge runtime space. And so a month or so ago, we announced the formation of WinterCG, Cloudflare, Vercel, Igalia, Deno, and Shopify are sort of the sponsors of that at the moment. And really, what we want to do is much like the browser arena have tried to push forward with standardization of things. We want to take on those things in WinterCG that are for sort of server runtime, JavaScript, TypeScript server runtime things, to make sure that when standards come through, that they do that, so we don't end up with a fractured situation where everybody's locked into Cloudflare or even Deno Deploy, right? We want there to be we want innovation in not through lock-in, right? We want innovation in the space through other mechanisms. As I said with Deno Deploy, there's a rich set of APIs. From a web platform perspective, there's a whole bunch of web platform APIs that where we feel that there's applicability in a server environment. We go ahead and bake those in if there's a good established web standard for it. And we also try to use a web standard. If we want to do something, we try to adopt an existing web standard. So you've got streams, you've got web crypto, web sockets, you've got fetch, request response, URL pattern, which is an emergent standard in the web standard bit, which we helped contribute to and push forward, which is sort of the path to regex baked into your browser, right? So Chrome has it. I think Chrome has it shipped now, and the other browsers are going to start shipping it. We've got it in Deno, so you got built-in routing. Matching now, and import maps, and then for those things that just don't make sense for a browser standard to exist, we've had to create a number of APIs within the Deno namespace. We try to be really conservative with these and not have a huge amount of cruft in there, but there are just some things that there isn't a good web standard for. And so we've got other things in there that allow some file access. We tried to use the web file stuff. It's a mess. It's a complete another mess. So we're still having to do some things on our own there. And even on deploy, we treat the repo that you deploy as a local file system. So you can actually write code that reads out of whatever repo you deployed, which is pretty cool. I've kind of had two roles recently over the past year. Obviously working on some of the core CLI stuff to deal with the language server, but the other part of my time has actually been dogfooding a lot of what we've done on deploy and trying to create web properties that are meet a particular need that we need for Deno, but also are an experimentation in that. And one of those is doc.deno.land, and this is it is a very complex bit of project. It's got WebAssembly in there. It's got a little bit of everything, but essentially what it does is you throw any sort of publicly readable JavaScript URL at it, a module at it, and it'll read the JS doc for you, render it, including the markdown comments and all of that sort of stuff, and do that on the fly for you. We obviously use it for documenting the Deno.land packages and libraries, but you can pretty much throw any URL at it and it'll try its best to figure out what it is. And as you can see, you know, this is off that real page there. You know, it's all server-side rendered. The only bit of JavaScript on that page is that copy button because you can't paste to the clipboard unless you use Navigator. So there's a little bit of JavaScript that copies the import statement in there, and the rest of it is there's zero client-side JavaScript, but it's all written in TypeScript on the server side. Okay. Oh, dogfooding. Okay, I'm gonna try this. We'll see how this goes. My ego may have gotten the best of me though on live coding. All right. I'm sorry? I will try one more. Let's see. I have no room now, but we'll try that. I still have 80 columns. Okay. Let me. I think one of the things that the industry has probably gotten wrong, and especially, not that I want to completely rubbish AWS Lambdas, but like local development has always been the afterthought of a lot of these tools, right? And because we started with the CLI first, local development was like the only thing that we had, and we wanted to make sure that local development transitioned well into that remote development. And we're not completely there yet, but because they're in a lot of ways the same code, it's allowed us to, the Deno CLI is a great development tool for deploy. So I've got a little framework that I've been experimenting with because, like I said, Oak, sort of the big Express-like framework for Deno. I've been experimenting with like how can I reduce that down to sort of a minimal get started. All I want to do is take some JSX and send it to somebody, right? And I want a low overhead thing. So I've been working on this project. So Deno CLI. This, by the way, is Kitson K /Deno-on the edge dash, and I'll share it afterwards. It's got a code space up there, so this is actually, I think I saw a tweet the other day, local dev is dead, right? And that could be the case, right? So this is running on a dev container on GitHub, and if you clone that repo and you open up the code space for it, it'll have the latest version of Deno installed for you. Deno run HTTPS, Deno land x not. All right. The one thing that we had with the Deno CLI, I mean, and we keep debating this internally, is like having a package manager can just like get in the way of things, like installing all of your dependencies locally. Like you have a tool that installs all of this, right? So you got to install all of your dependencies before you run your code. So Deno can run URLs, right? And so I'm going to run it here. It's asking me this is a little setup thing. Deno CLI doesn't have any permissions by default. You have to give it permissions. So it's saying, well, I want to be able to read the current directory, and I want to be able to write to the current directory. My little script here is saying, okay, I want to set up these things for you. Will you do that? And it's now written out the little scaffold of this librarian project. I have to cheat a little bit. This is a bug that I need to fix in the sense that it doesn't always, the extension doesn't update to the fact that some of the files have been written out, so I have to reload it so it actually reads those files, but I'll fix that. As I mentioned before, one of the lesser known web platform standards that Deno adopted fairly early on is import maps. And again, this is partly why we don't think you need a package manager, right? Because an import map essentially is kind of like your package JSON. It allows you to name and rename packages to make them easier to import into your code. And so on these imports here, the left-hand side is the whatever I want to call it in my code, and the right-hand side is what I'm actually doing. And you can see in here, it's scaffolded out all of the sort of packages that I need to use and have available in there, and where the code is actually there. And again, if I need to update a version, I don't have to update my package JSON and then do npm-i or yarn or whatever. I just go in here and change it, and it will update the code that way. So here's our main thing here. Really, really simple scaffold. I've got this router. Again, it uses the URL pattern behind the scenes to be able to do the pattern matching. I've got some JSX in here, which is a real basic thing. One of the recent things to the one of the recent things that have been added to Deno is the sort of scripts concept that we call them tasks. Also in my, I'll show it to you here, is I've got it scaffolded out this little task for me, which again, it has the permissions in there of which I'm allowing it to have. So it's allowing it to connect to the network, but it's also allowing a high resolution timer thing. So high resolution time is off by default in Deno to avoid sort of those sort of exploits there, somebody trying to profile your code and figure out, heartbleed and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to run that task now, and it's gone through, it's checked the code, it's made sure it's type checked, and there we go. So that's great, that's local development, but that's not totally interesting. Now I want to share my wonderful web app with the world. My web app. Oops. So I've got that up on GitHub here. Oh, okay, and this is going to be small. Just well, I'll go one more in. Okay, and you can see we've got our little thing up here, and I'm going into the deploy dashboard now. I'll get this as big as I can, and I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to select. Come on, there we go. Deno on the edge. I want main, and it's asking me what is the root of the project. And there we go. It's grabbed all my dependencies, and it's made the app available, and Kitson K-Deno-on the edge.Deno dev is live for the world to see now. So you can go there if you want to, but that's not totally, you know, the best thing. Let's do something more interesting. So. Like I said, fetch is baked in, HTTPS. This is another thing that I've been working on, is a more robust set of APIs for Deno, and particularly CLI. I think one of the biggest one of the biggest challenges that we've had is people discovering like what you can do with Deno, right? You know, everybody knows what you can do with Node because there's been 10 years of people using Node, right? But there's a lot of good software out there for Deno. People aren't discovering it. And I think that's been one of the factors of people sort of getting on board with it. It's like, well, where do I start? And actually, if you look at our main third-party package page at the moment, you wouldn't know that there was a lot of Deno stuff, and it's a problem that we know about, and it's one that is my day job at the moment is trying to change that and expose a lot of that and is there. Again, the advantage of having all modern standards, everything is ES modules, top level await has been there forever, and so I'm going and fetching some JSON that I happen to know, and I'm going to const packages is await, where is JSON? Well, this is just hacking stuff at the moment. Okay, and I think it's. I will try one more time. Okay, I have no space to type now. I think this is right. Hold on, I'm gonna cheat. Just AC API. Oh, good thing I checked that. All right. Oh, items. Okay. This is really hacky. Name. Okay. Name description. Okay. Name string description string. Okay. Okay. I don't even. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and let's see here. We'll do const items equals packages map. This is package. Oh, no, packages.
So what's that URL pointing to? API land Deno.
Yeah. So this is a work in progress. Like I said, so I've been this is literally work that did earlier today. Not all of API.deno.land, but it's active. We're not live with it yet. It's live. It's accessible on the web, but it's a API endpoint running on deploy, backed up with a Google data store, where it's fetching the information about packages that are registered with our package registry, and then providing it back. So I just happen to know that it's there. We could grab something else, but let's see here. Name, description. Okay. And name. Description. Okay, this is really hacky, and I won't torture you too much longer on this. Hopefully not. And let's see here. We'll return a div now. This little framework, you can see here, I'm server-side rendering everything. So this includes T-Wind, which is a great library if you're doing a lot of server-side rendering, and you like to use Tailwind functional CSS, which I am totally sold on these days. So that, oh no, there we go. And let's try see how hacky that is. Okay. And again, we can go ahead and that local development is really important. Hopefully I haven't screwed this up. Okay. Okay, I haven't screwed it up. Okay. But that's not totally interesting. Here, so let's see, class. And I'm not doing watch on this, I could, but I think it's list. I don't remember my Tailwind. Anybody know offhand? Oh, well, okay. We'll can worry about that later. Okay, so, and I've got local logging here, and you can see that took 6 milliseconds to render. Git commit am stuff. Push. Okay, and now it's on deploy. There we go. Okay, that's enough live coding for me. Any questions? And I'll be able to talk afterwards as well too. Yeah.
You're pointing to like a URL. So if I want to use Deno, I want to use an existing JavaScript framework like Express, could I? Or I'd have to wait for them to do the Deno style.
So, yeah. The top level thing is that there is a lot of the Node.js ecosystem that you can just use in Deno using either esm.sh or skypack.dev. which both package stuff as ES modules, right? And particularly ESM.sh is there. We know that that journey isn't totally complete, so things like Express that do really deep bindings into Node ecosystem are a bit harder to like make transparent and work over that sort of thing. But like Twind, Twind isn't developed for Deno. Twind is, and if I go back here and we look at the packages that I'm using in here, is the ones for Deno.land X are specifically written for Deno, but things coming off of ESM.sh like Twind are not. They're written, they're NPM packages that are being brought in just as a ESM bundle. So the journey is a bit bumpy from like Node to Deno, and it's one of those things that we're actively working on. Writing authoring in Deno and like sharing the rest of your code with the world is a little bit more established. There's a tool called DNT that we created several months ago that lets you take a Deno project and create an NPM package, including polyfilling all the stuff that you need from Deno to be able to have that work in the NPM ecosystem. But that two-way journey is from Node to, you can do it, but it's not super simple, right? On the other hand, a lot of people like why, if you're starting greenfield, like why would you want to drag Express in when there's better solutions out there that are there? And there are, for those things that you're comfortable with in the Node ecosystem, there's probably a better suited Deno package that's probably more modern, that doesn't have, isn't supporting, polyfilling strange, weird things and having 50 million dependencies, right? But yeah, if it's modern JavaScript or TypeScript, it just runs, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, but Peter said that if the package you're using is just JavaScript and there's no Node modules in it, then it would be fine.
If it's pure ESM and it's on NPM and it doesn't import something from a Node built-in package, then without any sort of transpiling magical CDN, it's just going to unpackage. You'll be able to import and use it in Deno. You just need to make sure that those any dependencies that it has is inside your import map. And you can have universal packages that start in NPM land, but it's harder to go the other way.
So it's going to resolve the lighthearted packages.
It won't need to use the package JSON at all if the NPM package is already pure ESM.
Sorry, how does just quite a nice way in general?
Well, I don't like Jest. People made a lot of noise about this is when Node.js included a minimal framework. We had done that like a year ago in Deno. I've taken up too much time, but it's also integrated into the IDE, and especially if you're using VS Code. So I'll just show you module test.ts. So Deno test is built in. There's a BDD library as well that you can import if you prefer that style test, and function. Console log. Okay. Hello. And if you're using VS Code, and the Deno language server, that already has the test API built in, and you can go ahead and execute your tests from in there. What's it doing? Supposed to, oh, there it goes. I don't know what it did. Okay. And so you have the full IDE integration for your tests. And you can also then just do Deno test, and it will glob for any tests and give you the results. So I would say, hopefully you wouldn't need Jest. But there are polyfills for Jest if you really feel like you, Jest just throws globals everywhere and makes your life miserable. Okay.
What's the story on observability? Like, how would you look at log output or like other metrics?
Yeah, so the like APM type observability that you get with like node runtimes for the CLI isn't as mature as that. So like async hooks, and there's quite a bit of instrumentation in there. It's one of those things that we want to eventually get to in the Deno CLI. Yeah, but like on deploy, like how the observability on deploy, it's growing. It's probably not as good as we'd like it. So there's some analytics about your performance in deploy. You can get logs, which we'll load here in a second. So so console log, just as you would there. In particular, it's using people are using my website. I'm famous. So whatever you can just console log, and the console log behaves just like it would on the CLI. Includes the Chromium, the %C and CSS arguments in the console log, which is how these are colored. So yeah, it's pretty there from a logging perspective, and there's additional information, but like the focus for deploy, particularly that zero config, like you can add some environment variables, but like that's all you need, right? What Git repo am I using? Every push, and you do another branch, it'll do a branch deployment for you. Give that available in there, so you'll be able to see your live one, but you can also see your Git history, but your branches also deploy there as well. Okay, I should probably yield the floor, and I'll be available afterwards. Thank you.